What's going on, everybody? This is DJ Recipe here, back with another video. Today's an exciting day. We're gonna go over how to install a complete car stereo in your home, including a subwoofer. Now, the things that you're gonna need are, all right, everybody. So now that we know all the items that we need for this project, the next thing we need to talk about is powering all these items. For those of you who have not seen how to connect a car deck in your home, please do watch that video that I have. I'll leave the link in the description of this video for that. It's very helpful. I do recommend watching that so you can understand all the connections at the back of that car stereo and what I'm going to be talking about later in this video. It'll make everything easier. So the reason why I tell you to watch that is because if you want to lessen the load of this power supply, you can power the deck only with another adapter, and then power everything else using this power supply. So let's get into the power supply and all the information, everything you need to know about that. All right, everybody. So what we got here is the picture of the power supply that I used for this project, and I will leave the link in the description of the video for this one that I've purchased. It is by EVGA. It's a 600 watt 80 plus K1 power supply, and if you go to the EVGA website, you will see that you can choose and select different power supplies. Obviously, the higher the watts, the better. But for my simple home setup, I decided to go with a 600 watt. And please go with what you can afford as well, and what works best for your setup. So the way that you determine how much power that you actually need is you want to take into account the amperage on your deck, your amplifiers, whether you're using 2 or 1. I am using 2 amplifiers. I'm using a 4-channel or a 2-channel, and another amplifier which is I'm using for my subwoofer. There are amplifiers that I'll show you a picture of or an example when we switch back to the other video, that it has all the functions in one. It's an Alpine amplifier. You can find those sometimes, but it's this one I found on the buy and sell, and it was actually a really good amplifier. It's got, I think it's got 4 channels. It's got a subwoofer input in there as well, so it eliminates having to use 2 amps where you can just use 1. So let's get back to this. So yeah, so the things that you want to look at are the accommodation of your deck, your amps, your speakers, and how much amperage and watts you think is going to be their total. So here's an example of just the Alpine amplifier. This is I believe it's a 4-channel. So yeah, you can see the channels here. So basically what I do is I look at the fuse panel of the amplifier, and this one's got 40 amps. This is a little overkill for your home setup. But if you want to use this, be sure to get a higher rated power supply. The amplifier that I'm using has 220 amp fuses, and I know that the car deck generally uses about 5 to 10 amps. So for my setup, I went with 49 to 50 amperage, which is, you can see that here, and that's based on the 12 volt rail. So what I mean by that is, if you Google the model of the power supply, there's a pinout diagram which pretty much gives you an explanation of what these power pins are doing. I'm just going to try to see if I can find a picture here for you. So basically these pins here, which are these, and that. So this all comes out of that power supply, and these get plugged into your motherboard and your computer, and the power is distributed based on what is needed for the motherboard. Sounds complicated. For those of you who are familiar with computers, you'll understand. And if you're not, you can do some more research. There's tons of information on this on the internet. So basically, this one that I'm using is a 24 pin. It's a 20 plus 4 here, so you can see. And when you go here, this is pretty much an explanation of what these pins do. This is a good page, actually. It explains how to test it. So on the back of your power supply, you have a AC cord that plugs into the wall. That gets switched on. When these are plugged into the computer, one thing that's important here to know is that there's a PS on. That basically switches and lets the power supply know to turn on into the computer after it's been grounded. So because we're not using a computer motherboard, you need to tell this power supply that it needs to be turned on from a safe source. So basically what this article is doing is wiring paperclip. So one of them is into the 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see there 1, 2, 3, 4. It's in the pin, the green pin PS on, and then connected to any of the grounds, which is the blacks. So he's done that. This person has done that this way. So once you connect those two together, when you flip the switch on the power supply will turn on without the computer. And this is the goal that we want, because we want to use this as our power supply. It's pretty much acting as our battery in the car. So what I've done is I've cut the wires on the power on these two pins, and I've joined them together. I can show you that when we switch back to the other video. But basically, this is a quick overview. You can see here the power supply gives you many different voltages. You get 3.3 volts, you get 5 volts, 12 volts, which is what we're looking for. It's the car voltage, and they're generally identified by yellow cables. And unfortunately, the power supplies that they're making now, although it shows the colors inside, they were all black when I received it. So I had to test each pin individually with the multimeter. I can show you that quickly on how to do that. And once we finish here with this overview, I'll jump right into that to show you how to test it. So basically, you're going to want to separate all your 12 volts wires and your negative wires to keep them separate. And all the other pins, like the oranges and the reds, which are the 3 volts, the 5 volts, you want to group those together and kind of tie them off to the side, because we're not going to be using that. We're only going to be using the 12 volt pins for this scenario. So basically, I'm going to show you guys how to test these with the multimeter, and you'll be able to identify which pins are the correct 12 volts to use. Alright, so one more thing before we get into the video. I just wanted to show this pin out, which is relatable to all the other cables that you're going to have with the power supply. And they used to look like this before at the back of the machine, where you plug them in and then you have the other end as well. But now they're all incorporated into the power supply coming out together, and all the pins will sort of look like this. They'll be you can match the number of pins to what's on the power supply, and there's tons of information. If you're not sure, please do Google and do some more research before, which is always helpful. I will post the link for all these pin diagrams as best as I can. And another thing that I wanted to note was that There are other methods of using power to these units. For example, they have actual power supplies with like digital screens. But I found that they don't go as high of an amperage as necessary. So these are good for testing, electronics and what have you. Um, they also make these type of power supplies, which are also very good. They look like little amplifiers, and these are also a great option. But I do find the computer power supply to be the most efficient, well built. They're very clear and easy to kind of follow through. They have nice cooling systems built in for long use of computer time. So I do highly recommend going with the brand name computer power supply. All right, so what we got here is the power supply laid out, and I've already gone ahead and separated the 12-volt wires into positive and negative groupings. So you have your power cord at the back here that connects here, and then in here coming out, all the wires and connection pins are going to be together. So I believe there was like 4 or 5 of them. I can't remember exactly. It was a while ago, but I went ahead from the 24 pin connector and I clipped out the wire, say 3/4 of the way, just in case I ever want to reuse them. I'm not sacrificing the actual pin cables right here too close to them, just in case I ever need to join them back. But you've got the PS on, which is the green wire, and a negative. Those are wired together, and I've capped them off here nice and clean. And out of that too, I've gone ahead and tested which wires were 12 volts. So you can see here, I've got a nice thick ground from a couple of the black wires, and I've created 12 volt here. I've gone ahead and put some heat shrink. Because the original colors on the other older power supply models were yellow for 12 volt, I went ahead and used that again, just because I'm meticulous like that. So I like to be nice and neat. I've zip tied everything together. I've gone ahead and twisted the wires too, just a little bit around each other, so they stay nice and clean. And so out of this, I was able to get 1, 2, 3, 4 connections for 12 volt devices. So pretty much out of this, you can connect to 4 different things that are running off of 12 volt batteries. I could have also split these again into smaller ones, but I generally tried to keep the wires fairly thick to allow for a good connection. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm gonna just cut this quickly and show you how to test the wires quickly. So let's get into that. All right, everyone. So before attempting this, I do want to urge a sense of caution here. This is to be done at your own risk, and please follow safety guidelines for electrical work. And I moved over from the carpet onto this padded area just to kind of reduce the static from any shocks. And while you're testing this, please do make sure that no wires are exposed and close contact with anything dangerous or even your skin. The last thing we want here is for you to get shocked. So I've gone ahead and separated these wires. Before, when I was testing it straight from the pin, it's not too much of a danger because the pins were in here, and I would generally stick the multimeter poles into here based on the chart. So if you don't get the right reading, it's probably because you have a mismatch of the negative and positive wires. I don't believe you can get shocked from the multimeter by doing this, but don't take my word on that. Please do your research. I never got shocked. I'm still here, so I hope this goes over well for everybody, and generally it should. So I'm just going to show you how to test it. If I've already gone ahead and separated, but I'll show you how to set the multimeter and just the reading that I get. So because I've already separated them, the positive and negatives are not touching. You can also go ahead and electrical tape any connections that you feel may be exposed. Those are capped. So I've got it plugged in, and I'm just going to turn it on here. You can see it spinning. So I'm just going to set my camera up here. I will leave the link in the description for this multimeter that I picked up. It's an automatic reader, so if you have it on a certain voltage, it'll find the right setting. Right now it's jumping a little bit, but I think that's okay. Let's just zero that out. So you want to place it on the negative and the positive, so you can see 12.14. That's roughly around what you want to see for 12 volts. So that tells me that all these wires that I've grouped together in the yellow are 12 volts, and all these are the negatives. So yeah, that's pretty much how you test it. You're going to set it on the V, which is the direct current. And yeah, you should be good to go. Once you go ahead, you can do that with, you can stick the multimeter in all the pins if you don't have the color-coded wires, and you can find your 12 volts. So let's get into the next part of the video. Alright, so now that we have a good understanding of the power supply and what's required for that, I just want to get into the components that I have here and have roughly kind of laid them out. This is not by any means complete positioning of where I would keep these. I just laid it out like this for ease of explanation. So basically I have an old school amplifier here. It's a 4, 3, and 2 channel amplifier. It's very great. I love it. It pushes a lot. You can bridge it to have to become a mono amp. And I also have another old school MTX amplifier. It's a 2 channel that I've bridged into using for the subwoofer here, which is a Kenwood tube amplifier. It's a 10-inch, sounds great. And I'm also using 2 small bookshelf speakers by Acoustic Research. These have a midwoofer and a tweeter. They sound great to me, and I'm using an old school Sony CDX GT500. So the power supply, you saw what I've been using there. So basically the power supply is connected here, and then I just wanted to show you and how I've tied off the wires here. So those two PS on, the PS on and the negative, which is the green wire and the black wire, I've cut those from the wire, the main pin set itself, and I've wired those two together. So every time I turn on the power supply, that's connected, and I've capped it off with an electrical cap here. These are great to use. You know, it keeps the wire out of the way in a safe manner, and I've gone ahead and zip tied the rest of the cables that I wasn't using, and I've taped it off with electrical tape. So now every time I turn on the unit, it gets triggered and it turns on, and that's running nice and smooth. No noise, nothing. I do highly recommend the same power supply, so I have left the link for that in the video description. And I've gone ahead and already tested all the voltages of each of the wire. As mentioned before, the old power supplies used to have their own colors, which the yellow would be 12 volts. So if you find a power supply that has the color wires, it'll make it much easier for you. So basically I've gone ahead and I've grouped the 12 volts and the ground wires so that they're connected from this, where they're coming in together. I've basically grouped like 4 or 5 of them together, so that would be, you know, a positive and negative for something I can use like an amp or a deck. And I've separated another one. I've got a bunch of grounds and two or three yellows, which is the 12 volts for another positive and negative, which I'm using for one. And I've done the same thing with another set, and I've got that going to another amp. And then These wires have all been explained in that other video of how to connect the card deck, so I do recommend watching that. This will make this much more understandable. These look like it's very complicated, but it's really not. So for those of you who have watched that, you know how to connect the power positive and negative, which I've supplied another positive and negative cable to those as well. So when you're grouping together the wires, I would make sure to use the more thicker ones for the amplifiers, because that will draw the most power out of the whole system. And this can push slightly bigger speakers. You can use car stereo speakers, which sound great for this setup. I do recommend getting a box for those if you are going to do that. You know, they generally come in like 6x9 speaker sizes. There's tons of those online. So I could also leave a description for the ones I recommend if you're interested in that. But basically, once you've connected your power supplies, in order to turn on the amp, you will need to create a jumper cable, similar to what I've done here. It's got to go from the battery positive and then wired right into the remote. That tells the amplifier to turn on. So basically, I just cut a piece of wire like this, and I just create a jump like that, and I join it with the positive and the remote. Of course, your ground is separate. So this amp here is 30. I've got two 20 amps. That's if you're using the full setup, but I think this is only drawing 20. This is probably drawing 5 to 10 amps. So I haven't had a problem at all with this 49 amp power supply. It's been running the system great. All right, so the way that you're going to connect everything is you're going to have the power supply off before you're connecting anything, just to make sure that there's no risk of electrical shock. You can even unplug it for now if you want, but basically the power cord comes into here. Once you have all your wires tied off and all, you're gonna connect your positive and negatives to each device. So pretty much this amplifier is gonna be used for my speakers. You put the positive and negative there, and the jumper loop that I told you about from power to your remote. And then you're gonna take a RCA cable, right, and you're gonna run it to the output of the front speakers or the rear speakers. You can do more if you want to, but let's just connect 2 speakers for now. That RCA cable is going to go into the input of the amplifier. I've got it in channel 1, which is left and right. So that's sending the audio signal into the amp. Then from there, you're going to take your speaker wires, instead of connecting them directly to the deck, which you can do as well, but connecting to an amplifier allows the strain of that to come off of your deck into this, and this manages the power, sort of like a home receiver, if you really think about it. So you connect your left and right to the channels that of your preference, and they go right to the speakers, right? So if you're connecting a subwoofer, now each deck should have a subwoofer out, which this one does here. This is my subwoofer out. You have to read the manuals online to find out where yours is, but I know that that's the subwoofer out. So you basically take another set of RCA cables and connect it to the input of the other amp. And then of course you have your power, another power set of positive and negative coming into that amp. So that would power that guy. And you still got to do that jumper loop that I told you about, because both amps need to know that they have to be turned on. Another way I believe you can do that is connect the remotes up to the deck if you want to do it that way, but this is the way that I do it. So If you have another way to do it, please do so. And then basically you connect another speaker wire from here into your passive subwoofer, which is this guy here. And that basically just has a regular speaker connection. And I've got my power ran from another source here, from the same power supply, but another set of wires that are powering this positive and negative. So all these other wires are not being used. Please do watch that other video so you know how to connect this itself. And basically when you turn it on, let's power it up. It does its check and all the lights are good. So this is spinning. That's on. That's on. And the deck is also on. CD's working fine. I'm not going to play any music from the CD because I may have copyrighted music on there and YouTube does not like that. So I'm just going to fire this up. You can hear the static on the speakers. I'm just going to switch this over to my auxiliary. I've got my phone connected here so I can show you guys how it all sounds. Just bear with me a second here. And of course, once your subwoofer is connected, you can control it from here. You can do your balance of your speakers. It's a fader, and there's a subwoofer control right there. Of course, if you have another set of speakers, you would connect it to your rear outs, or you can just feed it off of this amp that you got going, whichever one you choose of your choice. But yeah, that's basically how you connect a full complete car stereo in your home. Please do like and subscribe, leave any comments or questions that you have, and I will do my best to get back to you. But for now, take it easy and have a great day.